Mr. President, I think I'm only going to speak for, I think I have 15 minutes to speak. When I get about 13 minutes, would you raise your thumb or something and tell me, please?
I certainly will.
Thank you. I come to the floor today to spotlight a potential failure of leadership at the Defense Department Office of Inspector General. A large number of hotline cases have been set aside, neglected, and possibly forgotten. The hotline plays a very critical role in the Inspector General's core mission of rooting out fraud, waste, and abuse. The problem is the command and control link between whistleblowers on the one hand and investigators on the other hand. To succeed, hotline tips need quick and decisive action, but speed is not one of the chief assets of this unit. Without quick response, the full value then of whistleblower information is lessened. Last year, at my request, I was given a 12-page spreadsheet dated November the 8th, 2016. It listed 406 hotline cases that had been opened for more than 2 years or over 730 days. Frankly, I was stunned by what I saw with the information on this spreadsheet. I count 240 cases, over half the total, that have been open for more than 1,000 days. Many were more than 1,300 days. Some were right at a 4-year marker. That's 1,460 days. The oldest is now pushing close to 600 days. Even, if you'll believe it, a 5-year-old cases are not unheard of. So you can see why working quickly on these investigations, taking tips from whistleblowers and pursuing them on waste, fraud, and abuse is very important, and you shouldn't have this time wasted. When cases remain open for years, they become stale. Inattention breeds neglect. Work grinds to a halt. Cases slowly fade into memory. This is unacceptable, and my colleagues ought to consider it unacceptable, and the Secretary of Defense ought to consider it unacceptable. The hotline then, with this waiting period, loses its full value. The Deputy Inspector General for Administrative Investigations, Mrs. Marguerite C. Garrison, is in charge of the hotline. So she is accountable for the backlog. The backlog shows a lack of commitment to the hotline creed and the plight of whistleblowers. Here's why. Hotline posters are displayed throughout the Department of Defense. They are a bugle call for whistleblowers. They encourage whistleblowers to step forward, and they do that at considerable risk. In return, then, these patriotic people ought to deserve a quick and honest response. Allowing their reports to slide into a deep, dark hole in limbo for 2, 3, or 4 years, and even more, as I've pointed out, leaves whistleblowers exposed, leaves them vulnerable to retaliation, and of course, distrusting of the system that is designed to protect the whistleblowers. So in the end, this kind of a treatment will discourage others from stepping forward in the future. Hotline officials, including Mrs. Garrison, were questioned about the backlog on December the 15th, 2016. They attempted to deflect responsibility elsewhere, showed little interest in the problem. After numerous follow-up inquiries, a second meeting was requested. So at a March 30th meeting this year, Hotline officials were singing a whole different song. They tried to dispel the notion that a surge in cases closures were triggered by my inquiry. To the contrary, they said, it was part of a routine, ongoing, quote-unquote, cleanup of the Hotline mess that began way back March 2013. They reported 107,000 cases were swept up, including the so-called bad dog cases from 2002. This explanation may be fiction. Mrs. Garrison should know that the 400 cases date back to 2012 to 13. After sitting on the Hotline docket for up to 4+ years, these cases are anything but routine. They're tough nuts to crack, of course, very difficult to resolve, sort of like the bad dogs way back in 2002. But what they needed was clear direction from the top. They needed to be handed off to a tiger team, but that didn't happen. Priorities became an afterthought, and the Hotline mess got more nourishment. Then finally, the quote-unquote routine ongoing cleanup reached the 406 most egregious cases, the worst of the worst, the ones that bring me to the floor today. Since January, I received 5 updated spreadsheets trumpeting the closure of 200 of these so-called bad dogs, done with due diligence, I hope. Though late and incomplete, the surge shows what's possible when management starts doing what you expect management to do, in other words, managing. The backlog can be controlled and eliminated. So why did it take top managers so long to see the light and get on the stick doing their job? Maybe they just didn't care, at least not until the senator from Iowa started asking questions. Then and only then did they indicate what had been characterized as aggressive management oversight. Well, praise the Lord. Those words, aggressive management oversight, warm my heart. But the deputy IGs need to exercise aggressive oversight at all times, not just when a senator steps in, not just when embarrassing revelations get some daylight. Good managers don't need a senator looking over their shoulders to know what needs to be done. That's no way to run a railroad, as we say. The managers responsible for the Hotline mess need more supervision. One of Mrs. Garrison's other directorates, the whistleblower reprisal investigations, or we call that the WRI unit, is also crying out for help. It's facing its own Hotline style tsunami. It has a staff of 56 personnel, but only 28 of that 36, or about 50%, are actually assigned to investigative teams. They complete 50 or 60 reports per year. With some 120 cases under investigation at any one time, a large number inevitably get rolled forward from year to year. The backlog could easily double or triple over the next few years. In November, 38 cases were beyond acceptable limits. As of March 28th, the oldest one was 1,394 days old. While many of these cases were recently closed, New ones keep popping up on the list. Despite very substantial increases in money and personnel since 2013, the Deputy IG still seems overwhelmed by the volume of work. While beefing up the whistleblower reprisal investigations may be necessary, Mr. Fine and his deputies need to do more with what they have. With an annual budget of $320 million and 1,500 personnel workforce, efficiencies can be found. Some units are said to be top-heavy and ripe for belt tightening. The investigative processes are notoriously cumbersome and could be streamlined. The audit office, with 520 workers, turns out mostly second-rate reports. It needs strong leadership and it needs redirection. The Obama administration never seemed to take these problems very seriously. I hope this new administration coming in to drain the swamp will do better. Weak leadership gave us the Hotline backlog. Weak leadership is giving us the continuing mismatch between the workforce and the workload. Both are messy extensions of a much more harmful leadership problem, a festering sore that is eating away at integrity and independence. That is what I am hearing. So I'm telling you what I'm hearing. Top managers have allegedly been tampering with investigative reports and then retaliating against supervisory investigations who call them to account. This is sparking allegations that a culture of corruption is thriving in the Inspector General's office. I gave my colleagues a glimpse of this problem in a speech on April the 6th last year. I used the fifth and final report of Admiral Losey's investigations to illuminate on this problem. That report was allegedly doctored by senior managers. Investigators were allegedly ordered to change facts and remove evidence of suspected retaliation. Now, can you believe this? Mrs. Garrison even sent a letter that cleared the Admiral long before investigators had even completed the review of the evidence. This was a very serious error in judgment, given the appearance of impropriety. Was this then a cover-up to facilitate the Admiral's pending promotion? Thankfully, acting IG Inspector General Fine intervened. He showed real courage. After taking a first-hand look, he backed up the investigators, overturning some, but not all, unsupported charges. He helped to bring evidence and findings back into sync. I thank Inspector General Fine from the bottom of my heart, but Mr. Fine still has more work to do. The alleged doctoring of the Losey report, I am told, is not an isolated case. There are at least 5 others just like it, and probably more. All need oversight. For my colleagues, I'm just about done. As I understand it, the Office of Special Counsel is contemplating a review of these matters and could rule in favor of whistleblower reprisal investigations. They blew the whistle on all the alleged tampering going on, and you know what these patriotic people got for it? They got hammered for it. Got hammered for protecting federal workers. If top managers are tampering with reports and retaliating against their own people who report it, then how can they be trusted to run the agency's premier whistleblower oversight unit? All the pertinent issues need to be resolved, and they demand high level of attention. So I call on the new Secretary of Defense and the acting Inspector General to work together to address these problems. Number one, the hotline needs to be brought up to acceptable standards under stronger management. Number two, all potential solutions to the workforce mismatch need to be explored, including internal realignments. And lastly, an independent review of all cases where alleged tampering occurred should be conducted to include an examination of the Garrison letter clearing an admiral in the midst of an investigation. If tampering and retaliation did in fact occur, then culprits should be fired. I look forward to receiving a full report. I yield.